In ARK Survival Evolved, the whole topic of stat breeding is one of those where it's kind of overly complicated or not explained very well. There's a lot of videos that are over an hour long trying to discuss it, so I'm gonna try in this video to summarize it into a couple of rules and basics, put it in a way that's easy to understand, and most importantly, chapter it in the timeline down below so if you're already familiar with certain aspects you can skip ahead or rewind and just replay certain areas. Now, in my opinion, there are a couple of rules that apply to every single stage of breeding, and all of these rules will be explained in further detail later, so just for the time being, let's summarize it as the level of the dinosaur is just the total number of stat points it has. Without mods, mutations are always random and cannot be forced. If you're not getting any, you're just unlucky, keep going. Always use male dinosaurs to carry and pass mutations. Now, while following the previous rule, mutations passed in every generation will always get pushed to the paternal line, which is good, you want to keep that. And thus, the final rule, when you hit 20 out of 20 mutations, you can still inherit new mutations, it just can't generate new mutations. In other words, when you're at 20/20 on the paternal line, you can still generate new on maternal, and then the paternal can inherit it during Rule 4, in which every generation always pushes them to the paternal line. A little bit confusing, but this will be demonstrated later in the video. Now for step 1, the initial stats of your dinosaur. Ideally, you want to start with 2 identical parents, non-mutated, before you begin your mutation breeding. And to get 2 identical parents, you're just basically combining any wild stats that you find. Now, wild stats, I keep on mentioning stats. If you're unofficial, you can use Dex to figure out the stat weights of your brand new, freshly tamed, unleveled dino. You can do it while they're unconscious and in the inventory, or you can do it again after they tame. When you input the data into Dex, it will show you the total point allocation. The budget of point numbers is based on the level of the dinosaur. In other words, a level 150 will have 150 points to spare. These 150 points can be distributed randomly across all the stats. If you're an unofficial, you can use mods like Super Spyglass or Awesome Spyglass or Dino Storage, and they can show all the stats for you. Essentially, again, the entire goal is to combine all your stats, and you want to have perfectly even cloned male and female, 0 mutations. Or if you have enough patience and you want to roll the dice, keep on taming more wild creatures to increase your overall stat pool, and then combine the best from every creature, and again get that male and female clean unmutated breeding pair. Now for step 2, basic breeding. For the newbies out there, the way breeding in ARK works is that the baby will only ever inherit the existing stats and colours from the parents. It cannot generate a new colour, it cannot generate a new or different stat unless it mutates. Now, what I mean by inherited stats is that, say your male has 30 health and your female has 20 health, it can only get 30 or 20. It can't get anywhere in between, it can't get any more or any less, but it can get +2 or +4 in rare cases from mutations. It's always +2 with mods +4. But otherwise, this is all to say that you should never have any surprises. If you do have a surprise, it's probably always a mutation. Again, same with colours, it can only pull from the existing parents. Now, another very important basic thing about breeding in ARK is that it is only the females that get cooldowns. The males can just keep on going at it all day, all night, they've got no cooldown whatsoever, but the females will have a cooldown either for gestations or for egg laying or whatever, and that basically means that if you want to do like really efficient breeding, you want to get as many females as you can. Again, all the clean stats, no mutations, the same stats as the male, it'll make your job so much easier. You basically want as many clones as possible, 1 male, however many females you want. I personally go with 10. 10 is a good number of females where it doesn't lag out too much, but you've got a good chance of getting what you want. Not guaranteed, but a good chance. So now that we have the maximum stats from the wild tamed creatures, and we've combined them all and gotten a harem of 1 male and however many females you want, we are now ready to begin basic mutation breeding. Now, again, following the rules, mutation breeding is entirely random, and unless you're doing mods on unofficial, you cannot force mutations. So for the official and console players, I'm so sorry, this is going to be tough. But for the unofficial players who use mods, you can use the S+ mutator, and that can force mutations. I would recommend using 2 of these, because if you pulse twice, you can actually double your mutations, and it will just cause your 1 random mutation in melee or health or whatever to double, so you get +4 instead of +2. This can rarely happen in official, but I do mean rare. So let's focus on some stat breeding. Now I'm going to give you guys a quick little pro tip, and that is that before you begin your setup, you might notice that some dinosaurs, such as Argentavis, have a really restrictive and tiny breeding range. You have to have them really come together, and if you want to get lots and lots of females, it just doesn't work out. Not to mention it takes up a lot of space. So what I'd recommend is that once you have however many males and females, try and just breed loads of eggs or loads of babies in advance. Cryopod them, dinosaur them, whatever, just put them away. And then when you have your desired number of females, hatch or unpod them in all as a tight spot as you possibly can and let them all mature inside each other. Their hitboxes will be colliding, but as a result, what this means is that you'll never have to move your females. They're all going to be there permanently for the rest of the entire breeding process. This is it, your females are done. You only ever want to be changing your male around. So get a hitching post or a tech leash. Put your females on passive, make them ignore whistles, put them on permanent breeding. You can do that by copying the settings to nearby dinos, and this will save you a lot of space and a lot of headache, especially when you're doing multiple mutation lines. Now, speaking of multiple mutation lines, I would only really recommend this if you're quite confident with what you're doing. I'd say start with one for the beginning, but doing multiple lines and therefore having these multiple really highly dense clumps means that you can separate your males from each other's harem, and that way they won't cross over and crossbreed. But it also means that you can do all this at the same time and just save yourself a lot of time. You will use up a lot of food though, do be prepared for that. Now then, for the actual breeding of the mutation breeding phase, now that we've got all the setup and all the information out of the way, for the actual breeding, basically, you've got your females all stuck in a clump, you've got your male nearby, get them all to breed, and you're just hoping for any mutations. Now, say you have your melee line, you're focusing on melee mutations. What this means is that if and when you get any mutations on any of the 10 eggs from your 10 females, if you get a mutation in any other stat that is not melee, you want to ignore it, kill it, bin it, turn it into a kibble, whatever. Just don't contaminate your stats. Reason being is that we want to maximize as much as possible before the 2020 limit, because as the earlier rules stated, while you can still generate mutations past 2020, it is tremendously slower. It's really almost not worth the hassle, even with mods and S+, so again, you want to maximize as much as you have as early as you can. Don't contaminate your lines, only get your melee stat in your melee line, only get your health stat in your health line. If you have two different mutation lines and your melee line generated a health mutation, don't put it into your health line, just kill it off, trust me. Because you can't breed a mutation on top of the other stats, it's gotta be mutated on the stats or it just doesn't count at all. So yes, now we're breeding and breeding and breeding. You always want your mutated stats to also land male, because again, as said earlier, females have a cooldown, but your males do not. So you want your mutations on your male, that way your mutated male can then breed with your 10 females, and it just means 10 chances per breeding interval. It really speeds up the process and it makes it very streamlined and much easier to follow. So again, mutations always on the male, no contamination, keep it clean, keep it linear, it really pays off in the long term. Once you've gotten your mutated male, you want to breed out the females, wait for another male and mutated son, breed out the females, wait for another male and mutated son, breed out the females, and it's really rinse and repeat. Which demonstrates that mutation breeding is actually quite simple, it's just there's a lot of fluff and a lot of redundancy you got to take into account and purge away. Once you purge away the redundancy, the whole thing really kind of lines together. And that really is pretty much mutation breeding in a nutshell. You just want to keep on having these horrible irradiated male ones and keep on breeding them with the clean fails, and you should rinse and repeat. And you do that for every line and every species. This is going to result in quite literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of useless fodder. For these useless fodder, I would recommend, like, I don't know, feeding them to your dinosaurs for experience, or killing them yourselves, or just get meat and hides. Whatever you need to do, you will be creating an absolute massacre with this. So now moving on to hardcore mutation breeding. Now at this point you should already have 20 out of 20 on your paternal side, so that should mean that you got 20 times +2 or +4 stats in your melee line, or whichever line that you're after. Now at this stage, what this basically means is that on top of all the other RNG, it must generate the correct mutation, and it must generate that correct mutation and correct stats on the correct gender. Now we have an entire 50-50 coin flip on top. Because we are now working with a 0 out of 20 maternal and a 20 out of 20 paternal. That means 20 out of 20 paternal can no longer generate more mutations, but it can always inherit more in the next generation. Now, fundamentally, you are doing the exact same thing. You are still just breeding and breeding. You're using your mutated males, turning them into fathers, rinse and repeat. None of that changes, it just now means that you have a tremendously lower chance of generating the correct stat on the correct gender. It just now means you have a drastically lower chance to inherit all the correct stats, generate the correct mutation stat on the correct gender, for it to even roll in the first place. If it rolls onto paternal, it's lost, it fizzles, it's gone forever. If it goes into maternal, then it means that it landed somewhere, hopefully in the right location. This is where I'd normally recommend most people stop their breeding because it really becomes a headache afterwards, but if you're really hardcore or you're using mods, then you can keep on going. Now at the very end for the final finish, that is combining your mutations. Thankfully, this is basically just a repeat of when you first combined your stats at the very beginning to create your identical male and females. Thankfully, the actual mutation counters, 20 out of 20, are very arbitrary, and you may have seen some people kind of stack into absolutely absurd numbers like millions or billions. These are arbitrary numbers that have basically no meaning. All you need to know is that if it's past 20, you can't generate new. So when you're finally combining your mutations, this essentially means that you are finished and you're ready to take the fruits of all your labors, all your individual mutation lines, and combine them all together into your big super dino. This is really no different from your basic stat combining, but now it just means that because all your mutation lines have these max stats, it actually doesn't matter which is male and which is female because you're combining them all together anyway. So give yourself a bit of flexibility. If you need a female, you can have a female. You still ideally want to combine them all onto a male first because then it just makes it easier to work with other females, but in the end, whichever strategy works best for you, you're just combining them all together into your crazy super dino. And then once you finish combining your mutations, this is the point where I'd recommend you focus on your colors, because if you focus on your colors at any point earlier, it's all just going to get messy and mishmashed and all over the place. So now what you can do is, say you have a dino with the perfect colors that you want, just keep on aggressively breeding that with your male and mutated one. Again, the males just always make it an easier job. Keep on breeding the colors into your male line until you finally get a max level, max mutated male with the colors that you want, and then try and breed a clone of that into female. Then you got your clean breeding pair, and you can have as many crazy overpowered colourful babies as you want, and then it makes it nice and replaceable. You can have as many as you want, and you're just done, and it's a great satisfying finish. And overall, that is mutation breeding pretty much done. Like I said earlier, it's one of those things that is quite overcomplicated, but a lot of it is just fat and fluff that you just want to trim out the redundancy in the explanations, or the redundancy in all the stats and throw away babies. Wanting to focus on that very clear linear path, it does make quite a bit more sense. And I hope I managed to make sense in this and to help explain the process to many of you. Another important pro tip is that if you're looking to do like really insane post 2020 stat breeding, just don't go past 255 or I think 256, because at that point the actual integer of the in-game programming overrolls and it will just flip your dinosaur stats to 0. And you don't want that. That's a lot of hard work just gone down the drain. So again, 255 or 256 is your limit. You can only ever gain mutated stats in either 2s or 4s. So again, if you're at 255, don't go 257. Stay there, stay at 255, and you'll be safe. Your creature will not overroll. If you're unofficial, your creatures might get deleted past, I think it's level 450 or 500, but if you're in single player or unofficial, then your creatures should remain safe and you can keep these super dinos nice and securely. If you have any questions, please do ask in the comment section down below or on Discord. I'm really happy to try and explain things further. This is the method I've been doing in my own Let's Play videos, and after a lot of testing in single player, and I'm very happy and I do believe that this is the most efficient way. Although if you know of any better, I would really love to hear it because this is a tedious process and any improvement is always better. So please again, share your thoughts, share your questions, share your advice, and as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope this helps. Cheers and have a wonderful day.